Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and bringing you the news, the story behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for the survival of Christian civilization, it's going to be reality and not illusion or delusion that'll determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you of views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and for the next hour, they're going to be the views of William Kennedy, and William Kennedy is an investigative reporter, written a number of books on satanic crimes, and we have his books. Now he's written other books on Masonry, and basically I don't think we carry any more of those, but we do carry his book on satanic crimes, and it's always a pleasure to have William with us. Hi, William. How are we doing tonight?
Very good, Dr. Stan. It's always great to be on Radio Liberty.
Well, tell me, what are we going to be talking about tonight?
Well, Pope Francis has made some very bizarre comments.
Well, let me just comment that William is a Catholic. He's been a lifelong Catholic. But, of course, he has some differences with the leaders of the Catholic Church who seem to have a different view of the Christian faith than the traditional popes. But you go right ahead.
Oh, sure. I mean, I am a lifelong Catholic, and I'm not Catholic bashing. I'm just making observations about my church that are being reported in the mainstream media. That's all I'm doing. I'm just re-reporting what's been said. And Pope Francis, who was just recently made Pope, he's a Jesuit. He has 3 earned PhDs. Very smart man. Now, on his recent trip to Rio in Brazil, it was a very bizarre series of events unfolded. First of all, he downplayed his security. He didn't ride in the Pope-mobile, which is a bulletproof encasement that the former popes used to ride in to avoid being shot. He also lessened his security, and he ordered his guards to, drive into dangerous places and situations, which made it a living hell for the Rio de Janeiro police down there. Now, that behavior was very odd, but his statements he made while he was down in Brazil are very, very disturbing. He said he wants trouble in the diocese. A diocese is a collection of Catholic churches that is run by a bishop. He wants trouble in the diocese. He wants young people to occupy their diocese, so he's using the language of the Occupy Wall Street.
What does he want them to do? I mean, what sort of changes is he trying to get in the Catholic diocese? That's
the problem, Dr. Stan. He's using words like make a mess, make trouble, occupy, and he didn't define what he meant by those things. He even said he wanted chaos in the church, and he's been dubbed the Chaos Pope by the media. Now, he's an intelligent man. You know, he has, like I said, he has 3 earned PhDs, and you don't go from being a lower middle class person from Latin America to the leader of over 1 billion people in a church by being stupid or being humble.
All right, fine. So why is he doing what he's doing?
I'm trying to clear this up myself. I don't exactly know at this juncture. All I do know is the language that he used is very dangerous for someone as powerful as he is, if people take what he says the wrong way.
Well, he's asking for the young people to be demonstrating in the individual diocese. But what do they intend to accomplish with their demonstrations?
Well, that's the thing. He didn't define any of it. He just gave very open-ended pronouncements.
Hold that thought. We'll be back here in just a moment with William Kennedy. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest is certainly William Kennedy, a Catholic, lifelong Catholic. But he's commenting that the new Pope has made a number of very interesting statements calling for young people to be involved in dissent, and the bishops, certainly in the diocese, to even certainly take a militant stand and to create chaos. Why would he create chaos? Why would they want to create chaos in the diocese? And what is he calling on the young people to do to actually try to change? And just as William has said, he doesn't know, the Pope has not said what he wants to change. It seems he just wants change. But go right ahead.
Well, he just seems to be stirring up trouble and not defining his terms. And that's what I find upsetting about it. And just for people out there who don't realize it, the Catholic Church is 55% of all Christians. It has over 1 billion members. It's the largest single organization in the world, and it's the most globally expansive. It goes to more countries than the United Nations or the World Health Organization. So it has over 1 billion people in every corner of the world where there are people. The Catholic Church is represented, and when you are the leader of over 1 billion people, you have to be careful what you say and how you say it, because out of 1 billion people, if 10% of them take what you say the wrong way, 100 million people, if they hear things like make a mess, make trouble, they may take that as a call for physical violence within the diocese against priests and bishops and things. That's the problem I have with it. You can't make pronouncements without defining them. And Pope Francis knows this well. He's a Jesuit. They're like the smartest people in the Roman Catholic Church, and probably the most highly trained clergy in Christianity. I mean, it's very difficult to become a Jesuit, so there's nothing naive or innocent or humble about talking about making a mess. He also said another bizarre comment about gay priests and gay people. If they're looking for God, who is he to judge them? Well, he's the Pope of Rome. He's the Bishop of Rome. He's the moral and ethical voice of over 1 billion Christians, and it is his job, duty, and obligation to make moral judgments and ethical statements about behavior.
And now basically, of course, what you're doing is quoting the Pope, who said, talking about gay priests, I'm not the person to judge them. I'm not to judge them. Well, basically, it's not a matter of judging them, but basically God has said that homosexuality is wrong. And basically what you want to do is counsel them that what they're doing is wrong, and they should try to correct that, because that is not what the Pope says. That's what God says. And of course, the Pope is God's, at least theoretically, God's representative on earth. And the fact that God's representative will not judge, and has said, I will not judge the gay a priest, that is rather frightening to me.
Oh, it's extremely disturbing in that it's his job. And remember, we call ourselves a Judeo-Christian Greco-Roman civilization. That's what, when they say Western civilization, that's what they're referring to. And a big part of what formed our Western culture is the Roman Catholic Church, and there were always people who, from day one of Christianity, there were different Christians who had different ideas about what Christianity was and what Jesus represented. And the big thing came in 325 AD when Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. He held a council of bishops in Nicaea, and they had what's called the Nicene Creed, which even most of what's stated in the Nicene Creed, both Catholics and Protestants agree with. And that is our common heritage and our common lineage, whatever denomination of Christianity you have. Now, the differences between Catholics and Protestants, I don't get into that. John Ankerberg has a lot of good information on that. But most of the differences are very fringe things like devotion to saints and the Virgin Mary. But those are not necessarily obligatory things to do in the Catholic Church. Jesus Christ is still the center of it, accepting Jesus Christ as God who came to earth as a form to redeem humanity. That is at the central core of all Christianity, and if you don't have that, it doesn't really matter what denomination you belong to. You're not really Christian. And people who question the divinity of Christ or, have no fear of Christ, they're really not Christian in the way the founders like St. Paul and St. Peter intended for the church to be. So this is very important, not just for Roman Catholics, but for all Christians, because you have to remember, too, to the other, 5 or 6 billion people on this planet, when they think of Christianity, they think of the Pope. That is the person they think of. They don't think of Billy Graham, and they don't think of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and they don't think of, like, Desmond Tutu. They think of the Pope of Rome as being the representative of Christianity. And, they understand there are other denominations, but the core, they still see the Catholic Church as the core of Christianity. So when the Pope makes statements like he made it down in Brazil, it has ramifications for all denominations of Christianity. And it terrifies me when he uses these open-ended statements like make a mess in your diocese, occupy your diocese, and then doesn't clearly define what he means. Is he talking about revolution, physical violence? Is he talking about peaceful protesting? He hasn't defined his terms, and anyone in any position like his who's that powerful must define what they say and not make open-ended statements as he did, because like I say, even if out of 1 billion Catholics, let's say only 50 million of them worldwide took it the wrong way and started rioting, it could destroy the world's economy. If a certain amount of Catholics in every major world capital were to cause all sorts of trouble, you could bring literally anarchy or chaos to the whole planet. And I'm really not exaggerating, and people should go on Google and type in Pope Francis trouble mess, and you'll see all of the articles from the mainstream media, and they're dubbing him the Chaos Pope already. Now, some of the things he's come up with, he's trying to fix the Vatican Bank, which has been corrupt since 1832 when they started to collect interest. The Vatican Bank has been corrupt, since then. After the Napoleonic Wars, what happened is the Rothschild family became the primary bankers in Europe, and for the Vatican to be able to move their money internationally, they had to start charging interest at the same rates the Rothschild family were doing. If they didn't, they would be unable to move their funds worldwide, and even by then they were a worldwide organization with the Spanish Empire. So he is trying to clean up the Vatican Bank, which has been laundering mafia money and drug lord cocaine money through its bank, which is located in the Vatican, which is the smallest country on earth. It's a monarchy, and the Pope is the absolute ruler of Vatican City, which is, I think it's 1 square mile with the Sistine Chapel and all that. But I'm glad he's at least pointing out that the Vatican Bank is still incredibly corrupt. That's an important thing for him to do. But he's saying that, and then he's also attacking free market capitalism, which he's blaming for all the world's problems. It's not free market capitalism that causes all the world's problems. It's corrupt international bankers like the Vatican Bank that are causing all the trouble. Free enterprise capitalists they're what make the world run. It's corrupt bankers who cause things like the student loan crisis and the housing bubble of 2008. That was bankers lending people money that they knew that these people couldn't pay back. They took commissions for lending them the money, and then when all these people defaulted, they expected the U.S. federal government to bail them out. The same thing is happening now in China. It's bankers who are causing the problem, not free market capitalists. Classical free market capitalism, as defined by Adam Smith, has what is known as moral sentiment at its core, which is Christian ethics. What these bankers are doing, there's nothing ethical, moral, or even legal about them, and no one holds them to task for it. So the Pope there again, he's making contradictory statements. He's attacking free market capitalism, but also pointing out that his own Vatican Bank is part of this corrupt international system.
Well, our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. But certainly the Catholic Church is one of the most powerful geopolitical forces in the world today. But it's not simply a geopolitical or religious political. It is also a financial source. I mean, the Vatican Bank is one of the largest, and some people have said they even control up to a quarter of the assets of the world. I don't know if that's accurate. Have you heard that? How much do they hold in the way of assets with them?
A quarter of the world's assets. What the Vatican controls is 1/4 of the world's gold supply. All of the gold in the world is the size of a football field.
Hold the thought. We'll be right back. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest is William Kennedy. We're certainly talking about the Vatican. We're talking about the fact that the Vatican Bank is one of the most wealthy organizations in the world, controlling about a quarter of the world's gold supply. I knew it was very, very wealthy. And here's this little tiny country with a few, maybe less than 1,000 members there. That's the Vatican, and yet their bank, of course, is one of the most wealthy institutions in the entire world. And basically there are some dark, sinister spiritual forces at work here. We know that there was a satanic group within the Vatican that was working very closely with the Nazis, helped them to form, helped them to finance, helped them to escape to South America. Of course, they were working along with the CIA and MI6. There seems to be these forces, these more or less invisible forces, working behind the scenes that most people don't understand. But of course, our claim and our belief is that they're powerful spiritual forces working at the highest levels of the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, and our subversive element within our government that is using the wealth and power of the United States to bring about a one world government, and that the financial and military power of the United States is being used today to establish this one world satanic government for the coming Antichrist. Go right ahead, William.
Well, Dr. Stan, I'll relay an interesting story to you about the Vatican Bank. I don't believe anyone out there has heard. I was actually friends with Vittorio Mussolini, who was Benito Mussolini's oldest son, who died in the mid-90s. I knew him in the early 80s. I met him in Los Angeles. He was a film producer. He was never charged with any war crimes. He was kind of seen as a buffoon. But he was with his father, Benito Mussolini. He was his personal aide. And here's how the Vatican Bank became the most powerful institution in the world. In 1929, Mussolini signed an accord with the Vatican, making Roman Catholicism the official religion of the new Roman Empire, the fascist empire he was forming. The King of Italy also signed this accord, and what they did to compensate the Vatican for lands that were taken away from them by the Royal House of Savoy about 50 years before 1929, they gave the Vatican 10 billion lira in government bonds. And what the Pope did is he double-crossed Mussolini. And Vittorio Mussolini told me this when I had dinner with him in 1984. What had happened is they signed, a few days before they signed this accord, the Lateran Accord, the Pope made one final change in the documentation. It said that 10 billion lira in government bonds could be cashed at any international bank for any legal tender. In other words, if they wanted to take that 10 billion lira and cash it in for Mexican pesos or American dollars, they could do so. Now, a few years after that, Mussolini tried to undermine the Catholic Church by closing down all of the Catholic youth organizations and converting them to fascist groups. And what the Pope said was, if you do that, what you don't realize, when you gave us those 10 billion lira in bonds, we can now cash that at this new bank called the Bureau of International Settlements in Switzerland, which had just been set up in 1930 so that Germany could pay France its war reparations. But what they said is Mussolini didn't realize that this new bank, the Bureau of International Settlements, could be used for his bonds, and that gave the Pope the power to bankrupt Mussolini's fascist government. And Mussolini, when he found out about this, he told the fascist council, and he said, the man who did this, who played this trick on us, is secretly running the world. And names like Roosevelt and Mussolini and Hitler and Stalin and Hirohito are meaningless. Whoever thought this plan up, we have to find out who he is, because...
William, you go right ahead.
Well, as I was saying, Dr. Stan, what happened in the 30s is the Bureau of International Settlements in Zurich, Switzerland, and the Vatican Bank really became the two big economic world powers. Benito Mussolini had been kind of swindled and hoodwinked by the Vatican when he signed that accord in 1929, and he even considered retiring after he found out that the Vatican could bankrupt his government, because fascism is an economic policy wherein the government controls the currency and interest rates, and capitalists control the means of production. And seeing as the Vatican had a stranglehold over his currency, he technically no longer was a fascist economy, because he had no personal control over the rates of interest. And what Hitler did, Hitler tried to copy what the Vatican did. Every country he conquered, he would force them to move their gold supply to the German account in the Bureau of International Settlements in Zurich. And Mussolini warned him. He said, Hitler, do not send the gold to Switzerland and then use it as interest to get cash to funnel your war, because if you use gold as interest to funnel a war, it will eventually devalue your currency, which is exactly what happened. By 1943, German companies no longer wanted to take Reichsmarks, because as they were losing the war, they became more and more worthless. Now, when the war ended, what some of the Nazis did is they went to the Bureau of International Settlements in 1945, and they started to remove the gold that was being held there, gold bullion, that they took from like Czechoslovakia and Poland and places like that, and they used it to bribe the Vatican to give them fake passports to get out of Europe, mostly to...
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and William is just saying that he actually talked to Benito Mussolini's son, who told him how the Vatican had outsmarted Benito Mussolini. Mussolini had actually suddenly tried to undermine the Catholic Church by taking their boys' clubs and converting them to pastor clubs, and so the Vatican, in retaliation, simply cashed in the $10 billion.
They didn't do it.
Oh, they didn't do it.
They did. They used it as a threat against him.
Okay.
It was
how did the Vatican then get all the gold that they had?
Okay, they already had a lot of gold, and they had always had a lot of ornamental gold. Now, after the war, the German Nazis took the gold that they had stolen from countries they conquered, like Poland and Czechoslovakia. They cashed out their gold at the Bureau of International Settlements. Switzerland was neutral, and they gave it to the Vatican so the Vatican would give them fake passports so they could escape to Spain and Argentina primarily.
So, then, of course, some of that Nazi gold was actually taken over by the new German government, transferred to the United States, where it was held, and it still is being held by the Fed. I don't know how much it is, but it's a fairly substantial amount of gold. I suspect it's the same gold that the Nazis stole, or the Germans stole from their countries they conquered during the Second World War. But I know that the United States government is holding, or Fed is holding a great deal of German gold, which they said, well, we'll give it back to you in 7 years. So so some of it ended up here as well.
Oh, some of it did. They got mostly the SS officers got what they could out. You know, they couldn't get all the gold, but they got a considerable amount in order to bribe the Vatican into giving them safe passage to fascist countries. Mostly Spain and Argentina, as I said. And I also want to say, Vittorio Mussolini, on a personal level, I actually liked him, and he, denounced a lot of his father's policies against Jews, and, he was never he was considered he was overweight, he was seen as a buffoon. So he was kind of a harmless person, but he was a fly in the wall to history. And, some of the things he said, for example, in 1938, Mussolini was behind signing the peace accord between Russia, Britain, and Germany because he knew fascism had failed. He said, fascism will die with me. We lost the fascist cause back when 1929 when we signed that deal with the Vatican. So there's no point in even fighting with the democracies or the communist countries because they've already won. Now, when Hitler started World War II and invaded Poland, Mussolini was actually infuriated, and what he said to Hitler was, now we have to fight a war that we lost in 1929. So when you actually hear Mussolini's son giving you the inside story, it's very different from the perceptions you'll get remember, the winners write history. And Mussolini, he did that piece. He thought fascism was finished. He thought the Western powers had won, and he never wanted World War II. And Hitler didn't even inform him when he was going to invade Poland. Mussolini found out when he heard it on the radio. They didn't even bother to tell him. And, I'm not pro Benito Mussolini, don't get me wrong. He made a lot of horrible mistakes. But, people don't look at both sides of it. Like Joseph P. Kennedy kind of undermined fascism. And Vittorio told me that Benito Mussolini was always terrified of Joseph P. Kennedy when they made him ambassador to Great Britain. He didn't like him in Europe. And when he got fired in 1939 for allegedly making pro-fascist statements, Mussolini said, that's a big lie. He's not pro-fascist. Joseph P. Kennedy destroyed our fascist economy, and he's going back to, he told his son that Joseph P. Kennedy was going back to the United States. He deliberately got himself fired so he could go over and either run for president, or Benito Mussolini suspected that he might overthrow Roosevelt in some kind of coup. So it's when you hear the other side of it, some interesting facts certainly emerge.
Well, before we go on, would you like to get your telephone number out, your website, so people could know where to get your material?
Oh, sure. I don't have a telephone number, but people can go to williamhkennedy.com, williamhkennedy.com, and they can there's a lot of free material there, and they can order my book, Satanic Crime, at Radio Liberty, and there's a 4-tape special. You get my book and 4 interviews we did on Satanic Crime, and that's at radioliberty.com. That's where to get my material.
And basically, of course, if you go to William's website, you'll find all sorts of videos and all sorts of information there going into the background of this world satanic movement. It's not imaginary. It's very real. And William has some of the finest material you'll find anywhere on that field. Would you agree?
Oh, I've been working on it since 1994, and I work on it every day. I stopped counting the last time I counted, I had over 2,000 free links to videos on a wide variety of subjects, including occult history, Satanism, witchcraft and sorcery, lost civilizations, really interesting topics. And, it's a massive site, and the vast majority of the material is free for everyone to learn from, and I'm very happy to share it with people. It's like a big project. That's williamhkennedy.com, and just check out the free stuff. It's a lot of fun.
And, of course, we do carry William's excellent book, Satanic Crimes, and then we have a 4-CD set, Satanic Crimes, that has actually 2 hours of interviews with William and 2 hours of interviews with other people who've studied this world satanic movement. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not imaginary. It's very real. And, of course, if you haven't read my book, Brotherhood of Darkness, you need to get it, because there we give you the statements made by the Satanists. They're not imaginary. They're real, and they're in very, very powerful positions, both politically and financially throughout the world. But go right ahead, William.
Oh, sure, Dr. Stan. And just to let people know, you really have to use a lot of critical analysis when you study history. Ask questions, see if the sources are true. You never hear, for example, Benito Mussolini's side of the story. You don't get the whole story. You just hear he was an evil dictator. But you don't hear about the evils that the Western powers did, and you don't hear about the evil things the CIA did, recruiting ex-SS officers and things of that nature, and how they, more or less protected much of the Nazi infrastructure and allowed them to escape Europe, the most vicious of the people who ran the concentration camps and such things. The United States deliberately let them go, or even recruited some of them to work for the government. And what they said is, well, we denazified them, which meant they just said to them, look, you're not Nazis anymore, you work for us. That's how they denazified them. The Nazi party was finished. They said, you work for us now. So there was no, great ideological shift that these people had when it's not like they embraced American democracy. They were actually forced to work for the CIA. They had no choice.
But of course, the whole rationale was, well, basically, we were going to hire these guys. Maybe we didn't like them, but we needed their knowledge and understanding to help us fight the communists. That really sounded pretty good, and I have to admit that for a time I really believed that, until I found out that we were also funding the communists, as we always do. We always fund the best any man money could buy, just like we're funding the international terrorist movement today, just like we funded the Nazis in the years leading up to the Second World War. And if you haven't read the books, certainly America's Secret Nazi Plan, Why you need to get that, America's secret Nazi plan goes into the background of the funding of the Nazi movement by American corporations and banks. That's covered also in The Power Elite and the Secret Nazi Plan by Dr. Cuddy, and Sydney Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler by Professor Sutton. All of these books actively suppressed here in America because the last thing they want is for the American people to understand that we've funded the best enemies money could buy. And that's exactly what we're doing today with the world terrorist movement. And now the government has to listen to all of our telephone calls to protect us from those wicked terrorists who want to take away our freedom. So we give up all of our freedom to the establishment to protect us from the terrorists who've been funded since their inception by certainly our own leaders. Of course, they were listening to our telephone calls long before this. If you don't believe that, go on the internet and look up Project Echelon, ECHELON, long before we ever had a terrorist threat. They were still listening to and recording our telephone calls, but the average American must never understand that. We must think that now, of course, we're closing our embassies all over the Near East and the Middle East because of the terrible threat of terrorism, but nobody ever mentions we're funding these very terrorists we're so frightened of. Go right ahead, William.
Well, those are all certainly very important points that you made, Dr. Stan, and the crisis we're facing in the world is if there isn't major changes to end war and famine, billions of people are going to die on this planet within the next 50 to 100 years. And I'm talking billions and billions of people. We do have the science and technology to feed everyone on this planet. You know, they can grow food in the ocean. They even have a plan they can build space stations and grow food in outer space, but they're not enacting any of these plans because they're hoping that billions of people actually die in the next 50 or 100 years or so. They feel that we might be able to sustain 500 million to a billion people only, and they want to get rid of about 6 or 7 billion of us on this planet who they have basically deemed worthless eaters, which was a Henry Kissinger expression he used to use for people who he felt weren't productive towards his view of the world economy. So unless drastic, the two things that are plaguing humanity that will cause these billions of deaths are war and famine, and the people on top of our economic and political pyramid aren't doing anything to stop war and famine. They are actually encouraging it. And that if that doesn't radically change very quickly, the next 50 or 100 years for the human race will make the last, 2,000 years seem like a trip to Disneyland. There'll be billions of people dead from, as I say, war and famine, the two great plagues that will destroy us. I don't know any government or any world leader or economic leader who is doing anything to stop it. From what I can see, they are only trying to encourage war and famine on a massive scale, and it's just a very frightening thing. And people are, especially Americans and people in the West, they're just oblivious to the fact, We've all been, to a certain extent, hypnotized by television and the Internet and sports and entertainment, and we're not looking at the hard facts about our planet. Now, I have nothing against watching a ball game or going to a movie. I do those things myself, but they shouldn't be the ultimate concern of people when the world is in such a horrible crisis that they're not even aware of it. Well, if things keep going like this, there'll be no more ball games, and there'll be no more movies, and there'll be no more food at your corner store, because the useless eaters that they want to destroy just aren't in the third world, Africa and Latin America. They're here in the United States as well, and they want to get rid of the useless eaters or unproductive people here first.
Well, if I could just comment, what William is saying really sounds pretty far out, but the trouble is, it's true. And if you doubt that, simply go to your search engine on your computer and type in Population Control Agenda. Population Control Agenda. You can put my name or Radio Liberty there, but pull it down. It's about 12 pages. Pull it down and read it through from beginning to end, and you will be shocked. And this is something I wrote a decade ago. I could update it. There's so much more information, but they really do intend to kill off most of the people in the world by war, by famine, and by disease. They know exactly what they're doing, and of course if you suddenly then read the scriptures, you'll find that our Lord told us exactly the same thing, that these things are going to come about by war and by famine and disease, and basically they do intend to kill off the vast majority of the people in the world. And this is, people say, who in their right mind would want to do that? And the answer is nobody. Nobody in their right mind. We're not dealing with people in their right mind. We're dealing with people who create phony terrorist threats, who actually took down the Twin Towers because they wanted an excuse to go to war. And all you need to do is watch the Twin Towers come down a few times on television, and suddenly you'll see that this is a controlled demolition. How they did it, I don't know, but we do know that they did it. And basically watch the explosions there that generate all that dust. That is it, they simply vaporize the cement. Not only that, but they vaporize 1,000 bodies. They've never found 1,000 of the people who perished in the Twin Towers because they vaporized their bodies. And then, ladies and gentlemen, if you really watch Building 7 come down, typical controlled demolition, middle of the roof goes down first, then the base of the building goes down. Typical controlled demolition, Building 7, watch it. Go right ahead, William.
Well, Dr. Stan, there's a wonderful book people should read called Psychopaths Among Us by Robert Hertz, who is a Canadian PhD. And what he did is he did a study of crazy psychopathic people like I write about, like Charles Manson and Richard Ramirez, these serial killer murderers. And what he noted in this book is that these serial killers, what they all had in common is they had a demented plan by which they would kill millions of people and take over the world. Charles Manson had this thing, Helter Skelter, where he wanted to spark a race war where the vast majority of the world's population would be destroyed and he would be made king of the world. And what this book, Psychopaths Among Us, what this fellow concluded, this Dr. Hertz, is that when you look at people like Charles Manson and Richard Ramirez, they're actually failed psychopaths in the sense that they never fulfilled their complete destiny of taking over the world and killing millions of people. They only killed a relative few before they got thrown in prison. And then he said the only other people who think like they do are successful psychopaths, and that would be people like Hitler and Mussolini and Joseph Stalin.
Hold the thought. We'll be back in a moment. William, you go right ahead. But then, of course, I think we have some psychopaths in this country who
Sure, psychopaths from the world. That was his conclusion. And that the United States isn't exempt from this. And basically what he was saying is that failed psychopaths, like serial killers who wind up in prison, it's certainly a tragedy to the people they killed and their families. But when you look at the bigger picture, the people they've killed, the numbers are just a drop in the bucket when you consider that Monteith, a psychopath who was a success, killed 25 million of his own people. They say Stalin killed 20 or 30 million of his own people. Hitler exterminated millions of people. So the psychopaths to worry about really aren't serial killers. The odds of a serial killer harming you or someone you know are astronomical. You're more apt to get struck by lightning. The psychopaths to worry about are the successful ones who run the governments of the world right now and always have. And that's the very strange thing, is that they all seem to have this idea that you must kill millions or billions of people as a means to form some sort of utopia. and, Stalin and Mao Tse-tung and Hitler, and even, believe it or not, people in our own government over time were very the Bush family were our big population, depopulating the planet. They're been huge supporters of it for over 50 years, so we have to worry about the successful psychopaths in the government and the economy and not worry too much about failed psychopaths like Charles Manson. And there again, the book is called Psychopaths Among Us by Dr. Robert Hertz. That's spelled Hercz. He's a professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia, and it's really a fascinating book. He's the first person I know of to make that observation between a failed psychopath like Manson and a successful psychopath like Joseph Stalin. They both have the same sort of plan to butcher millions of people. Some of them fail and some of them are successful. And it's the successful ones we really have to worry about.
I agree with you totally. Well, I want to thank you so very much for being with us this evening. Parting thought before we let you go.
Well, just go to WilliamHKennedy.com, educate yourself, and educate your friends and family as well. And God bless all the Radio Liberty listeners, and good night.
Good night, good night. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and we hope you enjoyed our conversation with William Kennedy. Basically, of course, he mentioned that Mao had killed probably 25 million people. He killed a lot more than that. Go up to your search engine and type in Great Hunger. The Great Hunger, and you'll find out about this planned program of starvation in China between 1958 and 1962, where they actually killed somewhere between 41 and 44 million people, 41 to 44 million people in Sydney. The fellow who runs the Population Research Institute has told me personally, Stephen Mosier, told me that they had actually checked the facts, checked the Chinese records, and they killed actually close to 44 million people. They starved them to death over this 4-year period, and yet you're never going to hear this sort of thing. Let me suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that you get our 4-CD set on population control, that you get my talk on Agenda 21, the Covert Plan. That's Agenda 21, the Covert Plan. And my talk on population control, the Secret Agenda. Now that's 3 CD. There's 1 4-CD set, and then there's 2 CDs. We suggest you get these, and you then begin to understand what is really going on. We have an excellent 4-tape set on population control. We have so much information. Go to our website at radioliberty.com. That's radioliberty.com, where you can listen to our programs there 4 hours a day, live 24 hours a day, archived, where you can watch our DVDs, where you can read our newsletters, where you can actually read so many of our publications. Simply go to radioliberty.com. And then, of course, we hope many of you will give serious consideration to joining the Radio Liberty family of supporters and help us finance what we do, which is reaching out across America every day, trying to get people to understand what's going on. We do 5 hours of talk radio a day. It's an expensive proposition to buy time on radio stations, but if you're in a position to help us, we'd love to hear from you. Our telephone number is 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-544-8927. And we hope you want to join the Radio Liberty family. You can also remember that as 1-800-5-HIV-WAR. 1-800-5-HIV-WAR, because we are at war today. And we used that telephone number when we were trying to fight the AIDS epidemic and trying to insist that they use standard and effective public health measures to save human lives. Well, we failed. They've killed almost 600,000 people in America. There's between 1 million and 1.5 million who are infected today. And Sydney, and most of them are going to die. It's only a matter of time. And basically it's because we've steadfastly were blocked in our effort to use the same standard and effective public health measures to control the HIV disease that, of course, we utilize to stop the spread of syphilis. And then, of course, if you haven't read my book, Brotherhood of Darkness, it is available through our website. However, you'll have to understand that when I wrote that book, I knew that we were not doing what was right to stop its spread, but I didn't understand this was actually a manufactured disease. It was manufactured certainly by our biological warfare secret organization here in America. And we know this because one of the people who worked on it went to see Gary Glum, and Dr. Gary Glum wrote a book called Full Disclosure, and you can buy it up on the internet for about $100. Full Disclosure. We have a copy, we've read it, and certainly they created this disease primarily to kill blacks, which is why in Africa today, in the areas where they disseminated this disease, almost 25% of the adult population is HIV infected, and probably down the line they're all going to die. We're up against organized evil. Our number is 1-800-544-8927, 1-800-544-8927. Our webpage, of course, is radioliberty.com. And we hope you can join the Radio Liberty family and join in this epic struggle for the souls of men and the survival of Christian civilization. Please pray for Radio Liberty, our provision and protection.